Many video games, especially in the platformer genre, have two main actions you can take: jumping and attacking. We've already multiple times seen how Kirby fares when the option of jumping is curtailed. Today we'll be seeing about what happens when we try to cease attacking. So without further ado, is it possible to beat Kirby and the Forgotten Land without attacking? Before we begin, it's essential that we clearly define what exactly attacking entails. For starters, we're certainly banning general use of the attack button, which is B. However, I'm only applying this limitation to standard Kirby gameplay. It will not apply to the activation or use of Mouthful mode. Now, as for standard Kirby gameplay, there is one thing other than pressing the B button that we're disallowing. That would be pressing the A button while blocking. While yes, this obviously doesn't use the traditional attack button, with certain copy abilities like Sword, it activates moves that in the 2D Kirby games were historically activated using the attack button, like the Drill Stab. And honestly, I don't think I would be able to sleep at night if somehow I had categorized the Drill Stab as not an attack. And those are the rules. You may disagree with them, but quite frankly, I don't have any live communication with you as I'm writing this script, so it's what we're going with. Let's get started. We run, jump, and drive through the point of arrival, blissfully ignoring every recommendation the game makes for us to suck up any enemies or potential projectiles. That is, until it locks us into what amounts to be an inescapable cage fight with some dogs. Unfortunately, we cannot advance any further in the game without defeating these guys, which would imply a necessity to attack them. But that assessment overlooks the key fact that sometimes the best offense is a good defense. See, one thing you need to know about Kirby enemies is that they are like paper-mache noodly armed wimps trying to punch a cactus into submission. That is to say that whenever one of these dogs attacks Kirby with a melee attack, which is all that they are capable of, they take damage as well as Kirby. And even better, the as well part doesn't apply when Kirby is walking, because in that case the dog is the only party to take damage. So basically, Kirby can win this fight by just waltzing up to the center of the ring, putting his guard up, and letting his opponent self-destruct. Which I will certainly not complain about. But will such tactics be viable long-term? In Downtown Grassland, we may just find out. By and large, progressing through the stage is quite simple. We can especially have some fun with the Mouthful abilities on offer. But our fun is cut short by this ladder, preventing us from bringing the Mouthful abilities any further. What we're offered instead is the chance to finally get a copy ability, because obviously we haven't been able to get one yet since inhaling enemies would count as attacking them. But these copy abilities, Cutter and Bomb, are just lying around waiting to be picked up. Unfortunately, neither of them have any moves which we would not consider to be attacks, and therefore they're both utterly useless to our cause. This is particularly bad news given what comes next, namely a boss fight with Wild Edge. This is our first mini-boss fight in Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and this is where we discover that Kirby bosses achieve their ranks in the Beast Pack for a reason. The most obvious one being that these enemies don't hurt themselves when trying to attack Kirby. This, of course, completely invalidates the just block and let the enemies run into you strategy we've been using up to this point. Which puts us in the honestly quite untenable position, where we must deal damage to and defeat the boss, but have no legal ways to deal said damage. I shudder to imagine how many attacks will be required to bring this guy down, but I suppose we're about to find out. And really, what other choice do we have? No other options really exist for getting past this fight. At least, not that the developers intended. Have you ever heard of Mouthful storage? Mouthful storage is a useful exploit in Kirby and the Forgotten Land which allows you to bring Mouthful abilities into areas of a level where you weren't meant to have access to said abilities. The way it works is relatively simple. Step 1. Attempt to acquire a Mouthful ability. Step 1.5. Get attacked by an enemy while you're in the middle of acquiring said Mouthful ability. If this occurs with the correct timing, then Kirby should be interrupted in his attempt to acquire the Mouthful ability. Step 2. Go to where you want to use the ability. Step 3. Press B to finish the Mouthful acquisition. And there you go, now you have access to the Mouthful ability, basically wherever you want in the level, which includes the boss arena for Wild Edge. And therefore, we now actually have a source of damage we can use against this boss, which does not violate our rules. And as a side note, using Cone in a mini-boss fight in this game is actually very fun. I don't know why they didn't do more of this. Anyway, that's the boss handled, and the rest of the stage, honestly, is smooth sailing. Now we go to Through the Tunnel, which we can rely on our already established tactics to get through, and even save a hidden Waddle Dee in the process. Of course, being unable to attack does keep us from being able to interact with these cannons, which I'm sure keeps us from saving other Waddle Dees. In fact, we should probably expect our pacifist nature to keep us from saving a good number of Waddle Dees throughout our adventure. This could be problematic due to saving Waddle Dees being, required to unlock each world's boss level. For World 1, though, we should probably have enough slack to be fine. If Waddle Dees do start becoming an issue, then trust me, you will be the first people to know. However, if we're getting them with ease, then there's no real reason for me to bring them up, so if you don't hear about them going forward, that means they're under control. As they should be. For now, it's off to Rocky Rollin' Road, which is quite frankly amazing for Waddle Dee bonus objective completion. A trip to Alivo Mall presents us with slightly more issues than the prior levels. Specifically, it has a mini-boss fight again, and this time, as far as I'm aware, we don't have Mouthful storage available to us, since the only Mouthful modes in this level are lockers, which I'm pretty sure you can't use Mouthful storage on. The other hope we could have in combating Wild Frosty here is this invincibility candy. In theory, if we can get ourselves to the boss arena with invincibility still active, that would solve our problems. Unfortunately, with the moveset we have available to us at present, that doesn't really seem to be possible. I tried a couple times, but it ran out well before I was near the boss, so that doesn't seem like a great solution either. So what is there to do? We can't so much as damage, let alone beat the boss without attacking it. And to deal enough damage, we're not talking about 1 or 2 attacks. Resorting to standard combat against Wild Frosty would bring our attack number up significantly. Although, maybe there is a way to avoid attacking at all in this fight. Though, it may require some attacking beforehand. Welcome back to Rocky Rolling Road. Here we find the Ranger capability, or Gun Kirby as the internet likes to say, which unfortunately requires 1 attack in the form of some inhaling to acquire. But hey, we've got a gun now, which lets us deal damage without attacking. How exactly? Well, it doesn't. I mean, I'm pretty sure the average person would probably consider firing a gun to fall under the general umbrella of attacking. That being said, what we can do with it is use one of those precious attacks it gives us to hit a target off in the distance from the end of the level. This does bring our attack total up to 2, but trust me, it'll be worth it. Hitting that target builds us a nice little staircase, which we can climb all the way up to a HAL room. Here we find a good few capabilities free for the taking that we otherwise wouldn't have access to at this point in the game. What we're specifically interested in is ice. Now in this challenge, most capabilities really don't give us any benefit whatsoever, since most of what they offer are various attacks, which we're trying not to use. Ice, however, gives us some improved movement capabilities with its ice skating, as well as an upgraded block, the Ice Block. Now in one way, it is a downgrade, since you can't dodge while using the Ice Block, but it's not as if we're using dodges much in this challenge anyway. In exchange for giving up dodging, we gain something much greater in return. The Ice Scatter. Simply put, as Kirby finishes blocking, he does damage too, and can potentially freeze nearby enemies, including mini-bosses. Anyway, I don't consider Scatter as an attack since it's just a byproduct of not blocking anymore. So after that quick 2-attack detour, we now have everything we need to beat this mini-boss and finish Alivo Mall. Next up is the battle against Gormondo, which honestly, as long as you don't get greedy with your scatters, is pretty easy. Although I will say, I'm shocked I didn't get the achievement for going between his legs. Like, what does this look like to you? Oh well. Everbay Coast as a whole isn't too bad. Honestly, the fact that ice is our go-to ability proves to be a bit of a boon here, given all of the water around. The main obstacle we face here is really just the fragility of keeping our copy ability the whole way through a level. This is a Kirby game, so predictably when you get hit, there's a decent chance that you'll lose your copy ability. Normally that isn't that big of a deal, but of course in this challenge we can't recover a copy ability we've lost, since that requires inhaling it, which is an attack. Luckily at this point we can just quit the level and go back to Waddle Dee Town to retrieve it. Still pretty annoying though. That being said, one thing worth considering is the fact that we don't absolutely require to maintain our copy ability at all times in this challenge, like we do in our no jump challenges. Most normal gameplay we can get through pacifistly without a copy ability perfectly fine. Really, ice is mostly for defeating bosses, like Florina, who is probably the most annoying mini-boss to fight since she has one particular attack which blocking is highly ineffective against. And you know, blocking is kind of like our whole thing right now, so that's annoying to say the least. But overall, Everbay Coast is a pretty relaxing leg of the journey, capped off by a quite simple Tropic Woods fight. The next notable development occurs at Circuit Speedway. Here we discover the blueprints for Gigant Sword. Then, after a couple simple treasure roads, we have access to it. Gigant Sword is certainly usable, but compared to ice, is at best a side grade, but more likely, probably just a downgrade with some very specific utility. When blocking using Gigant Sword, Kirby gets access to the Gigant's Shield, which damages enemies that run into it, including bosses, and allows Kirby to walk around, though extremely slowly, while blocking. Unfortunately, it doesn't deal much damage, and like I said, movement in it, while possible, is extremely slow. Overall, Ice has a better DPS and is certainly my general preference, but I'm sure Gigant Sword has some use cases it's better for. That being said, it does a fine job getting us through the rest of Wonderia until the world's boss fight, where its damage dealing capabilities are shown to be agonizingly slow and ineffective. Ice proves to be much easier. Ice also fittingly gets us through Winter Horns without much difficulty. Aside from the mini-boss rush level, where you really have to make sure you keep getting hit to an absolute minimum, due to the fact that losing ice here necessitates exiting the level and heading back to Waddle Dee Town before starting all over again. So don't get greedy attacking, get in your shots, and then hunker down. Same logic applies with the King DDD fights. In particular, getting impatient and trying to ice him while he does his dive attack is a recipe for disaster. But he can certainly be taken down once you understand the attacks to cower before and which ones to punish. Oh, and have you noticed Kirby's cute new hat? Frosty Ice. I find it a nice little upgrade. Things next get interesting at Oliva Mall, Staffside. This level, I actually opted to attempt with Gigant Sword instead of Ice. As such, it was predictably slow going, but it was all worth it when I was able to use the sharp nature of the Gigant Shield to gain access to a vending machine. And then I found myself locked in a room, alone, with wild bonkers. Yeah. So, was it worth it? Yes. It's not long from there that we find ourselves in combat with Silly Dodo. The first part of the fight is a touch-and-go dance of going in, freezing a couple of times, then skating out. This is because his main attack in this phase can't be blocked, and therefore we need to make sure we get out of range of it to be safe from it. Then, in the next phases, he adds to that attack a few that are much more block-friendly. They really don't do much more than just drag out the fight with a lot of waiting time and turn the whole thing into a bit of a battle of endurance. A battle of endurance that we ultimately win. We upgrade our ice once again, this time to Blizzard Ice, as we enter Redgar Forbidden Lands, which, in general, being able to skate across lava, helps out with a great deal. The boss rush stage had me a bit nervous, but ultimately we've beaten all of these bosses before, and now our comp ability is better than ever, so it's really no sweat. Nor is the Beast Pack's final stand, and now it is time for the final bosses. Forgo DDD is decently annoying, especially that hammer throw attack of his, but certainly beatable. Next up is Leongar, who certainly requires some thought, but as usual with patience isn't too bad. Combating Fecto Forgo in the way that I'm playing is a lot slower than normal, but like a good car, it is very safe and reliable. I mean, if you just stand there blocking, he literally pushes himself up against you, dealing damage to himself. So, yeah, not much issue here, though it does take a while. And then, it's all capped off with Fecto Elfilis, which has got to be the hardest boss I've ever fought in a Kirby challenge. This is a boss with actual combos and follow-ups that we have to memorize. A boss that can basically, without warning, pull the floor out from under you. A boss where the temptation to get greedy is so great due to how long the fight is, especially with our meager means of doing damage against him. A boss who stays out of reach for large portions of the fight. A boss with a self-healing move that our DPS is not nearly suited for. Luckily, that healing actually gets weaker as the fight wears on, which I only now know because of how poor our DPS is against this boss, that I've seen it, I think, 3 times in a single attempt. Oh, and of course, it's a boss for whom every hit landed on Kirby has a decent chance of separating our hero from his copy ability, thus forcing him to quit out of the fight and start again, not from the beginning of this fight, but from the beginning of the Leongar fight. So yeah, basically, for the first time in Kirby Challenge history, our toughest hurdle to clear is actually the final boss. But after a brutal struggle, it is finished. The semi-truck launches, and we are finally through with this challenge, and have proved that it is not possible to beat Kirby in the Forgotten Land without attacking. Let's not forget, we had our 2 attacks towards the beginning of the challenge to get ice. But hey, we got through the rest of the game without attacking, which I don't think is too poor a showing. But anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you check out my previous video where I tried to get through Kirby's Dream Buffet without eating. Additionally, there's plenty of other Kirby and non-Kirby content on the channel for you to check out. And if you like what you see, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you can be first to know about what I do next. But until next time, I have been CMeeCraft, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.